I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents.
The sex scandal in Europe hits close to home for the Pope. We'll have the latest. We're almost there. Some practical advice on avoiding a mid-Lent crisis.
It's always good to get encouragement because sometimes you're not doing as well as you'd like to do.
And looking back on a life of love.
I remember a phrase that's not in the gospel. It's from Virgil, who says, "Love conquers all."
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Speak out. That is what Catholics in Pope Benedict's home country say the pontiff should be doing following news of widespread sexual abuse in the German church.
This criticism comes after the Pope met with the head of the German Bishops' Conference on Friday, but made no statement following that meeting. Now the controversy surrounding the spreading sexual abuse scandal in Europe is only growing. And to further discuss all of this, I spoke earlier on today with longtime Vatican observer Rocco Palmo. He's the author of the popular blog Whispers in the Loggia. Well, Rocco Palmo now joining us on the phone. Rocco, thank you so much for taking some time out for us today.
Always, Matt. How are you?
Doing well. Rocco, hope the same for you. First of all, let's get up to date here. Bring us up to speed on what you're hearing from your sources now and the latest on the developments in this story.
Okay, well, obviously it all began in Germany with reporting from Der Spiegel in January. Since then, 20 of the 27 dioceses in Germany have seen allegations come up. It seems the number of those is somewhere around 200, all of them dating back to the 70s, 60s, 70s, early 80s. The Pope's brother has been implicated, not personally, but in terms of the choir he led, so it's kind of come close to home for him. Beyond that, a case emerged on Friday from the Archdiocese of Munich dating to the years in which then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, now Pope Benedict XVI, led the Archdiocese. But both the Archdiocese of Munich and the Vatican were very clear to underscore that the transfer of a priest who had been accused of sexual abuse was made by the deputy to the then Cardinal Ratzinger, and that he was not aware of it. But the man subsequently went on to be convicted and was actually in ministry until 2008.
Right. Now, is that, knowing Pope Benedict XVI as we do now, is that kind of thing, is that in character for him? Is he someone who likes to really be in the loop on the goings-on, or looking at his character, the way he handles things, is it feasible to say that he might have been out of the loop on that one situation?
I think if you look at any major diocese, for example, the Archdiocese of Munich is roughly the same size as the Diocese of Brooklyn, around 1.82 million Catholics. And when you're the Bishop of Brooklyn or you're the Archbishop of Munich, you don't know everything that's happening, because you can only kind of listen to one person at one time and be in one situation at one time. So it's very easy. It's perfectly. That's why you have a staff, to kind of handle the day-to-day stuff for you. And so. It's perfectly feasible, it's perfectly comprehensible if a decision of the sort were made by the standards of the time. Again, all of this, society is one thing that I think all sides can agree on, is that the Church has, all of society together has kind of come to an understanding on sexual abuse we did not have 20 or 30 years ago, and I think a lot of that's due to the courage of the victims in coming forward, but also in terms of just seeing this not just as a moment of crime and sin, but a moment for the renewal of the Church.
Right. Now, there has been a lot of, I would say a lot, but there's been some criticism of Pope Benedict out there about him not being forthcoming with a statement on this to the view of some very quickly or quickly enough. What would you say about that, and what sort of whispers are you hearing about that?
Well, there's a great saying, Matt, that the Church moves in centuries, and the 24-hour news cycle, as we see in the media every day, is no way really to judge people or situations or really make the most concrete efforts to change something. Last week, obviously we're 8 years since the abuse scandals broke here in the U.S., and at the time the U.S. bishops passed what was called the Dallas Charter, a more stringent set of norms that was given the approval, that was approved by the Vatican, for zero tolerance. That is now, so it seems, about to be extended to the entire Church, that one credible accusation of abuse against the priest would remove him from ministry, if not the priesthood altogether, permanently, forever. And, bishops have been given a lot of leeway in determining that over the years. Now it seems the Dallas Charter and the other national sets of norms which certain countries, bishops of certain countries, have approved over the last 10, 15 years are about to be made universal so that there's one standard for the church. But also another development, the Pope is about to release a letter to the Catholics of Ireland about the traumatic sexual abuse scandals there. It was supposed to be released, I think, in time for St. Patrick's Day, but because of everything going on in Germany, it seems like it's going to have a much more universal focus, and now the latest date being kicked around for that is Holy Thursday, April 1st, so we'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be, of course, on the lookout for that. Now, do you think that there is an eagerness on the part of people who might be critics of the church to put a bullseye on Pope Benedict and kind of draw him into this or target him in any way? Is there an eagerness out there for that kind of thing, you think?
Oh, I'm sure, but at the same time, what you have to consider is that for so many and with time, those agendas will show themselves. We had them here in the States, so we didn't just have them outside the church. We had them inside the church as well. I mean, there were groups which used the moment to, protest church use it as almost like a subterfuge to protest church teaching on celibacy or the rights of, women priests or divorced and remarried Catholics, whatever. I mean, it's an issue that you can't question, that it undermines the credibility of the church and church teaching. When it's not handled well. But at the same time, you also have, again, really at its core, it needs to be a moment of renewal. It needs to be a moment of saying, okay, the best decisions have not been made in the past. But and sometimes there's a culture at the root of it, a culture that maybe gets too complacent, where there may not be always a living faith, and where the church has been more concerned with power or status, appearances. That's not what the gospel calls us to. Right. And so if there's one lesson in the scandals, wherever they break, it's that, that God is calling us back to a pure form of who we are.
Looking long term on the effect of this on Pope Benedict and his reputation, what concerns are there?
Well, I think it's too early to really credibly gauge those, Matt. I mean, obviously, the thing about the 24-hour news cycle is that, folks will look for stories and they may find a story or they may spin it. Benedict, always tends to have a trick or two up his sleeve, so I think we're just going to have to wait and see. God knows I'm not smart enough to read his mind, so we'll just have to stay tuned.
All right, Rocco. Well, thank you so much for bringing us the latest here and bringing us your viewpoints and obviously some things that we didn't know, because you always have your ear to the ground and you're always hearing things from all different circles. So we appreciate your perspective today. Thank you so much.
I'm always happy to help, Matt. Thanks so much. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thanks. You too. Well, Rocco Palmo there from Whispers in the Loggia. We have much more about Rocco on our website as well. Just go to currentsny.net.
And we'll also be keeping a close eye on this story over the course of time here on Currents. But stay tuned, there's much more on Currents straight ahead.
When we return, we'll have the day's headlines, including support for the latest health care bill from Catholics.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Coming up in just a bit, do you feel like eating an entire box of chocolates or maybe chowing down on a Big Mac?
Yeah, occasionally. I do, I admit it.
Me too. We'll have some advice on avoiding a mid-Lent crisis.
All right, well, stay tuned for that one. But first, let's take a look at the day's headlines. Breaking ranks with other Catholic groups, including the U.S. Bishops' Conference, the president of the Catholic Health Association has endorsed the healthcare reform bill that will be voted on by the House of Representatives this week. Sister Carol Keehan says the bill is not perfect, but it is a major first step toward healthcare reform for all Americans. The Bishops' Conference has said the bill calls for federal funding of abortions, but Sister Keehan says the bill mandates that if people choose a plan with abortion coverage, they must pay for that coverage out of their own pocket. Meantime, Denver Archbishop Charles Chaput says the bill does not meet minimum moral standards on abortion, conscious protections for healthcare professionals, and the inclusion of immigrants. In Rome, Pope Benedict called for Christian unity during an historic visit to a Lutheran church yesterday. 27 years after Pope John Paul's visit to the Lutheran Church of Christ, Pope Benedict said Protestants and Catholics should be thankful for the unity Christians have achieved through ecumenical dialogue so far. The pontiff also said that only God could create lasting unity among the different groups. Pope John Paul's 1983 visit to the same church was the first papal visit to a Lutheran congregation.
A federal appeals court ruling last week upholding the use of the phrase "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance is drawing praise from the Knights of Columbus. The group's leader calls the ruling a victory for common sense. The phrase "under God" was added to the pledge in part as a result of a lobbying effort by the Knights of Columbus in the early 1950s. Well, according to the latest numbers, there are more than 100,000 people living with HIV/AIDS in New York City. About a quarter of them live in Brooklyn. Well, this week is the National Week of Prayer for Healing of AIDS, and an Atlanta pastor brought the occasion to his congregation's attention in a unique way. John Bachman has the story from the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church.
We don't like to talk about these things in church. The church is precisely the place where we must confront this issue.
This week, churches throughout the country are talking about HIV and AIDS, but today, Reverend Raphael Warnock took AIDS awareness straight to the pulpit.
Know your HIV status. I'm encouraging the members of our congregation to get an HIV test.
Reverend Warnock led the way by getting a simple oral test himself in front of the whole congregation.
It was my way of saying we are not all infected by HIV/AIDS, but we're all affected by HIV/AIDS.
He led by example, and I think that was really beautiful, for him to do that.
We need to know, and the church is the place where you get all this information.
The test did its job. It got everyone's attention. In the process, Reverend Warnock warned his congregation that HIV and AIDS are still very much an epidemic in America, especially with African Americans, who make up 13% of the total population, but 50% of new HIV cases. Reverend Warnock says church is still the best place to spread the word.
Even in the high-tech age of Twitter and Facebook, it's still the drum of the community. And so we wanted to sound the alarm in our community regarding this epidemic.
Well, stay tuned, there's much more Currents coming up.
Just ahead, during the horrors of World War II, a popular movement was started. We'll look back at its founder.
That day I realized that I was leaving everything. It was as there was a collapsed bridge behind me.
Welcome back. Well, yesterday marked the 2-year anniversary of the death of one of the world's most influential Catholic laywomen, Kyra Lubick. From the ashes of World War II, this feisty Italian founded a movement based on unity and peace. I know a feisty Italian or two. The Focolare movement. You do too, right?
You took my line.
And its influence has spread all around the globe.
The Focolare movement, very cool. She once said, "Live in such a way that at the end of your life, you won't regret having loved too little." Very nice statement there. And for a closer look at how Kyra Lubick tried to live those words herself, we have this profile from Rome Reports.
Chiara Lubick was born in Trento, Italy in 1920. During World War II, in the midst of the horror around her, she was convinced that love was the most powerful revolution and the only antidote to pain. In 1943, she decided to devote herself to God. So she left her home and began to help those in need.
Avevo allora 23 anni. Ho capito quello che stavo facendo.
I was 23 years old when I devoted myself to God. That day I realized that I was leaving everything. It was as there was a collapsed bridge behind me. It was a bridge of life in the world. At that time I shed a tear, but I said, "Jesus, I'm all yours." And then I found an inner joy that I cannot describe because I was married to God. I was married to God. That day was December 7th, 1943. It would be the day she started the Focolare movement, which intends to live the gospel to the T and live the love of others through God.
Lì mi è passata per l'anima una frase che
I remember a phrase that's not in the gospel. It's from Virgil, who says, "Love conquers all," and also that love will be victorious. From that point forward, she traveled around the world with thousands of people to spread that message. She received many awards, including UNESCO's Award for Education and Peace. The Anglican Church also awarded her with the Cross from the Order of St. Augustine for her work in ecumenical dialogue. The founder of the Focolare movement died in Rocca di Papa, near Rome, in 2008. Today, it's estimated the movement has 2 million members in 182 countries.
Well, what a remarkable woman with a remarkable legacy. Focolare means hearth or family fireside in Italian, and certainly that spirit of family and unity was important to Kyra Lubick. For more on her work, you can visit our blog. Just head on over to currentsny.net and click on Riding the Wave. And you know, it's funny, I once had a priest say to me that he thought that I came from the hearth. He thought I'm Italian too, and I'm pretty feisty. I'm a Taurus as well, not that that means anything. But that idea of coming from the depths and the soul of the fire and the pit, and then sharing all of that love in a way. You know, I kind of feel a little identity with her there, you know?
And I love that statement too. I mean, live life in such a way that at the end of life, you won't regret having loved too little. Words to live by, I'm telling you. It's a great sentiment there. And of course, I mean, being with that sentiment that you expressed there from that priest,
yeah, no regrets.
I can understand why it's caught on.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And if you're sitting around an Italian table, there's always food too.
Absolutely.
Which is part of love to us.
You can ask her, you can ask Lino Rulli, anybody.
That's right.
We'll stay with us. We have much more Currents coming up straight ahead.
When we return, don't give up. How to stick it out as Lent enters the home stretch.
It's supposed to be a sacrifice. It's supposed to be penance, and everyone should be reminded of that.
Well, finally tonight, you know, we've all heard of a midlife crisis. You know, you go out, you buy the red sports car, the convertible, all that. But how about a mid-Lent crisis? Incredibly, believe it or not, we've crossed the halfway mark of Lent now. It's now less than 20 days until Easter.
Right. Well, if you're having trouble keeping your spiritual batteries charged, if you're tempted to like buy that box of chocolates, as you alluded to earlier, you know, help is on the way. A parish out in Queens recently hosted a talk to help keep the season all in focus.
It's widely known that there's a generation gap for some reason when you go to church. There's always the elderly, and then there's the teenagers, but there's that age gap. We were kind of wondering where they went, and this is an effort for us to kind of reach out to that level, to 20s, 30s, 40s.
Catholic Fellowship is an organization. It's organized in the Diocese of Brooklyn and Queens, as well as the Archdiocese of New York and the Diocese of Rockville Center. It has different chapters in different parishes throughout that area, and it has events throughout the year. Most of the events start off with the Mass, and then they have a speaker on some type of spiritual and religious topic, and then they have an opportunity to socialize.
Today we specifically have a Lenten talk we entitled Mid-Lent Crisis, because for many young adult professionals, the Lent seemed to just pass by, seem to creep up on you, and next thing you know, it's mid-Lent, and you still have not done anything, no spiritual preparation. So today our topic is about that and try to put us back on track on the journey towards Easter.
By the middle of Lent, we start falling back. It's just our human nature. We start falling back into what we started, what we used to do, and sometimes we have to, maybe just hear a talk or hear somebody or look at, see something to get us back into, the zone again. My family, I'm the oldest of 8, and we love to eat. We're an Italian family that just eats. So I gave up in between meals, eating second portions, but also a lot of doing. Yeah, I didn't eat lunch yet, so I will participate in the lunch.
Mid-Lent crisis is actually, it's kind of funny. I think at some point everybody has a mid-Lent crisis because it's supposed to be a sacrifice. It's supposed to be penance, and everyone should be reminded of that. So since we are at this midpoint, whatever you gave up, whether it's food or an activity or shopping, for example, it's good to be reminded of the purpose of why we give something up for Lent.
You know, for me, Lent is a busy time for a priest, so that's why we kind of like, I can also experience a crisis. In the spiritual life, it's really difficult to say that it's too late or not too late. We always say that it's really not too late to always come back, to always turn back to God.
It's always good to get encouragement, because sometimes you try to do certain things and you're not doing as well as you're not doing as well as you'd like to do. I think it's a good idea, but it's always a good idea to come to a Catholic fellowship event.
Well, I have to say that thankfully, for the most part, I have not been tempted to break my Lenten pledges or anything like that. But I think, like I said, it's because it's come organically from me. It's just sort of an overall health consciousness thing, as opposed to just saying that I'm going to try to white knuckle something for, 40 days.
Right, right. It's not just cutting out one thing. It's like a lifestyle kind of a thing, which is good because, I mean, a lot of times they say, and I've done this before in my life, if I try to lose a few pounds or something like that, which I'm kind of trying to do right now, you have to change, you have to change, your lifestyle and the way that you handle a lot of things in your life, and not just try to cut back on the calories or not just try to, exercise more. It's like an overall thing. So that's good. You're avoiding that mid-Lent crisis.
Well, I think when you think about it in the terms of what God probably intended for us is, our overall health and well-being, and part of that is the respect for our body as well as for our, minds and our souls. And I think that part of what the idea of giving up things for Lent is about is keeping that in mind and sort of being able to say, let's reevaluate. We may have sort of gone a little bit astray here and kind of dipped into the chocolate box a few too many times, but you can always kind of go back. And I think that that's sort of where I'm coming from anyway. And hopefully, anybody else who's out there struggling with the mid-Lent crisis, midlife crisis perhaps too, who knows, I hope not, that there is help out there for that as well. And you can always get back on the wagon again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a difficult thing to do to get back on it. And it's, as easy as it is to fall off, just climb right back on and you can get back on it. And, we still got less than 20 days to go.
Along. Yes.
Right. Come along for the ride. Well, that's it for tonight's edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, you'll meet an outspoken defender of Pope Pius XII, and he actually might surprise you. He's a Jewish man from Queens, and he's got a remarkable story to tell.
Well, you won't want to miss that one, but meantime, so you won't miss any of Currents, remember you can always watch us online at currentsny.net. You can also follow us on Twitter, and you become a fan on Facebook as well, where we post previous episodes, so you can check us out over there as well. Until next time, I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Have a great one.